All right, the president's top economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, is now apologizing to the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, after calling her confused about new sanctions on Russia. Sources tell CNN that Kudlow called Haley to say that the policy had changed and that she just hadn't been kept in the loop. Our senior diplomatic correspondent, Michelle Kaczynski, joins me to try to explain what's going on here, because I'm still not quite sure I understand the timeline.
Well, I don't get confused, John, so I don't know what's wrong with you. But yeah, this was a weird situation, to say the least, that only got worse. First, you have Nikki Haley coming out and announcing sanctions against Russia, sanctions which never happened. You don't have the White House explaining why there was this huge and important disconnect. State Department was silent. Nikki Haley was completely silent on this. And then you have the president's economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, saying this.
She got ahead of the curve. She's done a great job. She's a very effective ambassador. There might have been some momentary confusion about that.
Okay, so you have this then riding for several hours during the day, and apparently rage building up in Nikki Haley to the point that she puts out this statement, very simple, just sent it out to a limited number of news outlets. With all due respect, I don't get confused. Just the nature of that statement, how angry do you need to be to put something out like that? She obviously felt it was very important to push back on the White House's line, which had by then been coming from numerous anonymous sources connected with the White House, basically blaming Nikki Haley for not understanding the policy. So she felt so strongly about this that she had to put that out, obviously indicating that the White House line was not true. And if the White House line isn't true, then why is the White House putting out information to the American public that's not factual? So you have Kudlow now apologizing to Nikki Haley in a phone call, but is it possible that the White House should apologize to anyone who got that information that Nikki Haley is strongly and clearly disputing, John?
Yeah, I admit to being confused on this matter. Michelle Kaczynski, thank you very much. Appreciate you being with us. Retired Rear Admiral John Kirby back with us, along with CNN political analyst Eliana Johnson. Eliana, you have also been doing reporting on this. You know, is Haley in any kind of trouble here? I mean, there are stories that the president was yelling at the television screen when she was talking about sanctions.
I don't think we quite know if Nikki Haley's in trouble, but here's what we do know. We know the president signed off on a package that included bomb attack on Syria and sanctions on Russia for their support of the Assad regime. And that was last week. At some point between the president signing off on that and Nikki Haley's appearance on Sunday shows, something happened in the White House. The president changed his mind, and that was not communicated to Nikki Haley. And I don't think the White House wanted to blame the president, and so they've given a number of varying explanations for what happened. They said the Treasury Department didn't have the sanctions ready, but they didn't want to say, you know, the president changed his mind on this, we're not doing it. And Nikki Haley, I think, made very clear yesterday that she was not okay with taking the blame on this. Came out and said directly, I don't get confused.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing more confrontational, you know, the former Southern governor could have said beyond "I don't get confused" is "bless your heart, Larry Kudlow." That would be the only thing that I think would be a more direct rebuke. Admiral, what does the world see here? I mean, look, there's a very important policy in debate here, is whether the United States is going to continue to be hard on Russia. So what do U.S. allies and adversaries think when they see this confusion?
Once again, they see irresolution, they see equivocation, they see unpreparedness, and a little bit of frenetic policymaking. However it happened, it obviously didn't happen in a very cohesive, comprehensive way here. And so it's definitely damaging, further damaging to our credibility with allies abroad, and it's certainly confusing to the Russians, I'm sure, as well. And it puts our UN ambassador in a very difficult place. Good for her for standing up for herself, but it certainly doesn't make her job any easier now in New York City going forward. It does sow confusion.
And she has operated, to some extent, Eliana, in her own world, on her own political track. She was hard on Russia at a time when the White House wasn't. The White House, to some extent, is caught up policy-wise on Russia. She's commented to an extent on the president's personal issues with women, saying that the people who accuse the president of various forms of sexual misconduct, their voices should be heard. So is there any sense of the political relationship now between the Nikki Haley office and the president's office?
It's a great question. I think Nikki Haley has been insulated a little bit because she lives in New York and works out of New York, and she's been protected, I think, by the geographical distance from Washington, D.C., which keeps her out of some of the infighting, and she's not in the president's personal presence. But you're right, she has diverged at times and been a little bit more hawkish than the president has been, particularly on Russia, though many of his advisors had been. But what I'm hearing from administration officials is that the president often signs off on things that he hasn't necessarily fully internalized or understood, and then when he hears those things articulated by his advisors or administration officials, he gets very angry. So he did this when Nikki Haley announced sanctions on Russia. He did this to Rex Tillerson when he said the U.S. had a long-term plan to stay in Syria, and then 2 months later the president said we were pulling out. Both of those things were things the president had signed off on, and then he reversed course suddenly, but it really puts his advisors and cabinet members in a tenuous position when they know that they could be undermined by the commander-in-chief at any point, days, weeks, or months later.
All right, Eliana Johnson, Rear Admiral John Kirby, thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate it.